black man boards his own luxury jet and gets denied his seat in first class. 10 minutes later, the captain's career ends mid-flight. What if the person you humiliate actually owns the entire plane? What happens when calm dignity collides with institutional arrogance at 40,000 feet? On a crisp morning above the clouds, a sharply dressed passenger, quiet, composed, anonymous, is told by a flight attendant that seat 1A isn't for people like him. The crew follows the lead of a commanding but prejudiced pilot, and the whispers in the cabin begin. But what the crew doesn't know is that this man isn't just a passenger. He's Ellis Raynor, the billionaire CEO of the very company that owns the airline, and he didn't come to make a scene. He came to observe in silence until silence became injustice. What unfolded next would shake the aviation industry, shatter assumptions, and lead to dismissals, reform, and redemption all mid-air. So buckle up, because this isn't just a flight, it's a turning point. Tap like, hit subscribe, and share this story if you're ready to find out what really happened when the truth sat in seat 1A. The private terminal at Dallas Executive Airport was unusually quiet for a Saturday morning. A soft breeze shifted the edges of polished magazines on the coffee tables. Beyond the glass, the runway gleamed in the sun like a silver thread woven into concrete. Inside, attendants moved with precision, crisp blazers, clipped voices, sterile smiles. Ellis Raynor stepped through the frosted glass doors with no entourage, no flash, just a tan overcoat folded neatly over one arm and a small leather duffel in the other. He looked, to some, like a man out of place, to others, like an assistant picking something up for someone more important. He offered no correction. He never did. At 46, Ellis Raynor had long mastered the art of walking through doubt without dragging it with him. He carried himself like someone who knew exactly how the world worked and had stopped asking for its permission. But this morning wasn't a leisure trip. This was something else. A test. A check-in, not just of service, but of soul. And it began right at the gate. "Sir," came a voice, tight and rehearsed. The woman behind the counter didn't look up right away. She was focused on her tablet, tapping through manifests, guest codes, crew schedules. Boarding passes are pre-verified for all Horizon Lux flights, she said without meeting his eyes. "Please step aside while we check your name." Ellis nodded, calm. "It's already been approved. Raynor, Ellis." Now she looked up. Her eyes swept over him like he was a question on a test she didn't remember studying for. "Do you have credentials?" she asked. Credentials. Not ID, not verification. That word again. He pulled his digital boarding QR from his phone, held it out. She stared at it, then back at him. Her brow wrinkled. "You're not on the manifest," she said slowly, "and first class is restricted. Horizon Lux has a very specific clientele." Ellis didn't move. "Are you saying I'm not your clientele?" He asked, no accusation in his tone. Just a question, honest, unshaken. She shifted uncomfortably. "This flight has a high-profile roster," she added, as if that explained anything. "I'll need to contact the captain." Ellis waited, silent, composed. A man across the lounge glanced up from a magazine. Young, cocky, designer hoodie, gold-rimmed shades tucked in his collar. He smirked and leaned over to the woman beside him. "Someone always tries to sneak into first class," he whispered, not quietly enough. Ellis heard. He said nothing. Not yet. Moments later, a woman appeared from down the hall, tall, tightly coiled blonde hair pulled back beneath a pilot's cap. Stride firm, voice firmer, Captain Mallory Grant. She had been flying for over 20 years and carried every year like a badge. "Problem here?" she asked. The gate attendant turned. "Captain, this gentleman claims he's seated in 1A, but he's not listed on today's manifest." Mallory's eyes settled on Ellis. She didn't blink. "Sir," she said flatly. Credentials, Ellis showed her the same code. She didn't scan it, didn't even glance at her device. "Not verified," she said. "We don't allow walk-ins or manifest changes at this level. First class is closed. You'll need to wait in the lounge or arrange an alternate flight." A few feet away, the young man in the hoodie chuckled under his breath, loud enough to be heard. Maybe he thought it was Southwest. Laughter, light, cruel, just enough to make the moment feel small. Ellis's breath was steady. He adjusted his sleeve, then looked Mallory in the eye. "I'm not asking for a favor," he said quietly. "I'm asking for fairness." Mallory crossed her arms. "You don't look like someone who belongs in 1A, she said. "We fly executives, not journalists or whoever you are." The words weren't loud, but they were clear enough to split glass. A hush rippled through the lounge, and yet Ellis remained unmoved. There was a moment then, a pause in the noise, the kind of silence that feels like standing on the edge of something shifting. Ellis had known that edge before, when he was 19 and followed through a department store by security, when he was 31 and asked to wait outside his own boardroom, and now, again. This wasn't unfamiliar, it was just louder this time. Mallory signaled to the attendant, "Escort him out, now." But then, from the far corner, another voice interrupted, soft, feminine, steady. "Wait," said a woman with a camera bag slung across her shoulder. "I think I'd like to see how this ends." Heads turned. Eloise Tran, travel photographer, quiet observer, and today, witness. The moment cracked. The gate attendant hesitated. Mallory's jaw tensed. Ellis took a single step forward, still holding his pass. "You have one chance to confirm this," he said, "or you'll be confirming something else entirely." Mallory stared at him, unreadable. "You threatening me?" she asked. "No," Ellis replied. "I'm inviting you to do better." Behind him, someone whispered, "Who is this guy?" No one knew yet, but in 10 minutes, they all would, and by then no one would ever forget his name. Inside the aircraft cabin, the air smelled faintly of citrus and leather. Polished trim gleamed along the edges of the aisle. Gold buckles caught slivers of light, the kind of plane where even the silence seemed wealthy. Ellis Raynor stepped in, calm, centered, coat folded over his arm, eyes scanning not for luxury, but for intention. He walked slowly, passing the first row, and then, "Excuse me," said Captain Mallory Grant, stepping in front of him like a checkpoint. "You're not cleared to be on board." Her voice was level, controlled, but it carried the weight of entitlement. Ellis didn't flinch. "I have a boarding pass," he replied, "issued through corporate authorization. I'm seated in 1A. Mallory didn't look at the pass. She simply shook her head. "You're not listed on today's manifest," she said. "This flight is full." Ellis held out his phone. Mallory ignored it. From seat 1B, a man leaned forward white, maybe late 30s, with the smug confidence of a tech mogul and the mouth of someone who'd never been told no. He snatched the phone from Ellis's hand and sneered. "Let's see what we have here." Ellis didn't stop him. He watched instead like he was observing a species he already understood. The man, Tyler Vex, co-founder of a VC firm whose money talked louder than his manners, held the screen aloft for show. "Nothing verified," he declared, waving the device. "Doesn't even look like a real code." He tossed it onto the floor. The pass landed face down near Ellis's shoes. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. But every eye in that cabin followed. Some with curiosity, some with disdain, some like Eloise Trans with a quiet kind of fury. Ellis knelt slowly and retrieved his phone, wiped it clean with the edge of his sleeve. Mallory stood above him. "If you don't leave now," she said coolly, "we'll involve security." Ellis straightened, brushing his coat with deliberate care. "I suggest you scan the manifest again," he said. "Line 42. Mallory blinked, a flicker of doubt. She turned toward the flight attendant behind her, Jenna Rowe. Young, early 20s, eager to please but clearly shaken by the exchange. "Rowe," Mallory said, "verify line 42 on the cabin manifest." Jenna hesitated. Mallory's voice sharpened. "Now!" Jenna tapped her tablet screen quickly, nervously. Her brows pinched as she scrolled. I don't see a line 42, she said softly. "The manifest stops at 41 today." Mallory smirked. "There you have it," she said. "You're not listed. End of story." But Jenna didn't look convinced. She scrolled again, tilted the tablet, backtracked. "There's something odd," she muttered. "Just audible enough. It skips. 41 to 43. Mallory froze. Ellis said nothing. "Not yet." Tyler Vex scoffed. "You people are always trying to make yourselves fit where you don't belong," he muttered. That word again. "You people." Jenna turned pale. Eloise Trans stood, camera still slung across her shoulder. "Did anyone else hear that?" she asked, voice calm but cutting. No one answered, but everyone heard. And suddenly, silence became complicit. Mallory stepped forward again. Her tone changed, less protocol, more personal. "This is private charter," she said tightly. "Not a public bus. You don't just show up." Ellis locked eyes with her. "I didn't just show up," he said evenly. "I built the route." Mallory blinked. "What I said," Ellis repeated. "I helped build this route, this aircraft, this company." She stared at him. Jenna looked up from her screen. "Ma'am, I think there's been a manual edit." Mallory snapped. "Jenna, enough." Ellis turned toward Jenna gently. "Would you mind telling me who requested the manifest update?" he asked. Jenna opened her mouth, then closed it. "Then I'd need to check the changelog. It's buried." Eloise moved closer now, quietly turning on her audio recorder. In seat 3C, a man, Malik Jordan, a young black software engineer in a charcoal hoodie and glasses, began typing rapidly on his phone. He wasn't filming. He was documenting. Quiet fury lived behind his eyes. Tyler Vex leaned back smugly. "This is ridiculous," he said. "The man's clearly lying. If he belonged here, why wouldn't we know him?" Mallory nodded, arms folded. "This flight is full," she repeated. "And you, sir, are not a passenger." Ellis looked down for a long moment. When he looked back up, something had shifted in his gaze, not anger, but a kind of weathered resolve. "Jenna," he said softly, "I'd like you to call this number." He handed her a contact from his phone. "Celine Knight. She's with Executive Compliance. Tell her we need to run an internal check. Now." Mallory interjected. "You don't give orders on my aircraft." Ellis replied without raising his voice. "No. Captain, I give them from above it." Mallory's lips parted, but she said nothing, because somewhere in the back of her mind, a thread had just snapped loose, and the moment it did, everything began to unravel. The cabin had gone still, not quiet still. There's a difference. Quiet is when sound fades. Stillness is when people stop breathing for fear it might tip the balance of something delicate. Jenna Rowe stood near the flight panel, clutching Ellis Raynor's phone like it held more weight than she was trained to carry. Her thumb hovered over the call button. "Should I really?" she began. "Call her," Ellis said gently. "Tell her what's happening. Don't lie. Just tell her." Captain Mallory Grant paced 3 steps forward. "This is highly inappropriate," she snapped. "You're undermining crew authority." Ellis turned his eyes to her, but not with defiance. With something deeper, pity, maybe, or disappointment. "I'm protecting this aircraft's integrity," he replied. "Can you say the same?" Mallory blinked. For a moment, she looked unsure. Then her face hardened again, like she'd remembered the mask she wore. "Jenna, you're not calling anyone," she barked. "That's an order." Jenna's hands trembled. She looked down at the number. Her lips moved as if she was silently mouthing it. From seat 3C, Malik Jordan leaned forward, watching Jenna. He wanted to say something. He didn't. Not yet. His jaw was tight. He remembered his first job interview in Silicon Valley. He remembered being asked if he was really into tech, or just looking for an inclusive quota. He remembered walking out, silently, without protest. But this time he wouldn't walk out. Across the aisle, Eloise Tran gripped her camera, lens cap still on. She wasn't filming, not yet. She wanted to document something else, the look on people's faces when they were exposed. Truth was more powerful when it revealed itself. Eloise pressed record, audio only. Tyler Vex stood up from seat 1B, stretching his arms like a man tired of waiting for the world to bow to him. "You're wasting everyone's time," he said loudly, glancing around. "The man's clearly here to stir things up. We've got a schedule. Let's get him off the plane." No one responded, but the air tightened. Mallory turned to her first officer, Kenley Moss, who had been silent until now. "Moss," she said, "get airport security. Now." But Kenley hesitated. He was tall, late 30s, hair trimmed sharp, posture precise, but his fingers twitched as he reached for his radio. "Captain," he said slowly, "I'm not sure this is the right move." Mallory raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me, he's calm," Moss said. "He hasn't raised his voice. He hasn't resisted. If we're wrong, this could escalate beyond Mallory cut him off. We're not wrong. He's not cleared." Jenna, still holding the phone, finally pressed the call. The line rang once, then twice. A voice answered. "Cool, controlled. This is Celine." Jenna's words came out thin. "Hi. This is Jenna Rowe, flight attendant on Horizon Lux 804. There's been a discrepancy with the boarding pass. A passenger named Ellis Raynor claims she paused. The voice on the other end didn't. Give him back the phone. Please," Celine said. Jenna passed it to Ellis without speaking. He held it to his ear. "Celine." "You heard all of it," she said. "I'm logging this conversation and streaming it to internal compliance. I'm also pulling the manifest history now. Would you like me to notify Legal Ellis's voice remained soft?" "Not yet," he said. "Let's give them one more chance to choose integrity." Captain Mallory exhaled sharply. "You can't possibly think this is going to end well for you," she said. "I know exactly how this ends," Ellis replied. His eyes didn't leave hers, but in his mind, something flickered. He was back in a meeting 10 years ago, when he'd first considered acquiring Horizon Lux. Back then, it was a boutique fleet elite, polished but poorly managed. He saw the flaws, the gaps in ethics. He'd written reform into every contract, every clause. But culture was harder to rewire than software. A voice crackled from the cockpit speaker. "Cabin crew, please prepare for taxi." Mallory reached for the intercom. "No," Ellis said calmly. "We're not moving this plane until the manifest is corrected." Kenley looked up sharply. Eloise lowered her camera. Tyler laughed, dry and arrogant. "He's given orders now." This is laughable, but no one laughed with him. Even Jenna seemed to be leaning inward toward Ellis now. Not away. Celine's voice returned in Ellis's ear. "Update," she said. "Your name was on the manifest. It was removed at 7:46 a.m. by manual override. The authorization came from an onboard login, username M. Grant." Ellis exhaled slowly. "Thank you, Celine." He stood taller, stepped into the aisle. Then he said it, not loudly, but with clarity. "My name was deleted from the manifest by the captain of this aircraft. This isn't a security issue. It's a prejudice issue." No one interrupted. The silence this time, it didn't belong to fear. It belonged to recognition. People were listening now. Some for the first time, some with guilt, some with shame, some like Jenna and Kenley with awakening, and Ellis. He stood alone, but not for long. Jenna Rowe didn't move. She stood frozen near the galley panel, her face pale under the cabin's soft LED glow. In her hands, the tablet still blinked the digital manifest screen stuck between line 41 and line 43. Like it didn't want to admit what had happened. Like even the code couldn't look Ellis Raynor in the eye. Ellis didn't pressure her. He just waited calm as glass, and more dangerous than it looked. Across the aisle, Tyler Vex was pacing now. "You're making a scene," he barked. "You've been caught, you've been exposed, and you're dragging us all down in your little vanity act." Malik Jordan stirred in his seat. His fingers tightened around his phone. But he said nothing. Not yet. Eloise Tran didn't stop recording. Captain Mallory Grant stepped forward again, her posture still proud, but there was something new behind her eyes now. "Worry." "You can't prove anything," she said, voice thin. "There's no evidence of misconduct." Ellis turned to Jenna. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the tablet. Jenna blinked, then hesitantly passed it to him. He scrolled with a fingertip trained by years of oversight: first venture deals, then fleet acquisitions, now the very culture of his company. The change log confirmed everything Celine Knight had said. Manual edit, username M. Grant. Time 7:46 a.m. Ellis tilted the screen toward the passengers. "This is what deletion looks like," he said quietly. "Not a shout, not an accusation, just truth. Let it speak for itself." Captain Grant laughed once a brittle sound. "Come on," she said. "Let's not act like this is some grand conspiracy. Maybe someone made a clerical error. Maybe Jenna entered the wrong name." Jenna shook her head immediately. "I didn't touch this manifest. I wasn't even on shift yet when that change was made." Kenley Moss, still seated near the cockpit, stood up slowly. "Captain," he said cautiously, "if this change came from your login." Mallory shot him a look sharp enough to cut wire. He stopped speaking. But the silence after his sentence, it said enough. Ellis handed the tablet back to Jenna. Then he pulled out his phone again. "Celine," he said, "can you confirm whether my credentials match the current security key for priority boarding?" Celine's voice crackled back through the line. "They do. Tier 1 classification, executive override. You're authorized for any Horizon Lux flight worldwide." Ellis turned slightly, his gaze sweeping across the cabin now, addressing everyone. "I wasn't here to use that," he said. "Not today. I boarded as a silent guest, an observer. I wanted to see how Horizon Lux treats its passengers when no one's watching." He paused. "Now, you're all watching." The man in seat 2C, an older gentleman in a crisp gray suit, finally spoke. His voice was low but steady. "What's your role with Horizon Lux?" Mr. Raynor Ellis looked at him directly. "I'm its founder and its current CEO." Gasps, audible and immediate. Even Tyler Vex took a step backward, his mouth parting in disbelief. Mallory blinked once, then again, then once more. "No," she said, "that's not possible. The CEO isn't flying today." Ellis nodded. "You're right. That's what you were told." Kenley Moss sat down heavily, as if the oxygen had left the room. Jenna looked like she was about to cry. Tyler stammered. There's no way. You're dressed like a man who didn't come to impress you," Ellis said calmly. "I'm not here to be seen. I came to see." Eloise Tran whispered aloud. "My God." Ellis turned his attention back to Mallory. "You didn't need to say anything cruel," he said softly. "But you did. You didn't need to doubt my presence, but you did." He glanced toward the cockpit. "And now, I have to decide what to do with this flight." For a moment, no one moved. Then Jenna spoke. "There's something else," she whispered. Ellis looked at her gently. "What is it?" Jenna hesitated, swallowed, then she held out her own device. "I didn't delete anything," she said, "but I've seen things. Notes, handwritten ones, in a small red notebook the captain keeps." Mallory's face drained. "That's irrelevant," she snapped. But Jenna was already continuing. "She marks certain passengers, gives them ratings, things like, 'Watch this one,' or 'Unverified appearance.' I've seen stars next to passengers of color more than once." Ellis looked at Mallory. "Is that true?" Mallory didn't answer. Malik Jordan stood slowly. His voice was low, angry. "You people keep asking us to prove we belong," he said. "To smile, stay calm, swallow it all. But the moment we ask for fairness, we're the threat." He pointed at Ellis. He didn't raise his voice once. "Not once. And you tried to erase him, like he was disposable." Mallory stepped forward again. "Enough. You're out of line." "No," Malik said. "You are." Ellis raised a hand not to stop Malik, but to recenter the room. "Let's not turn this into chaos," he said. "That's not justice. That's distraction." He looked around. "This isn't about me anymore. It's about whether this aircraft and this company has room for truth." Then, to Jenna, he asked, "Where is the red notebook?" Jenna hesitated, then nodded. "I'll get it." And with that, she disappeared toward the cockpit. The tension didn't break. It simply changed from denial to dread. Jenna Rowe emerged from the cockpit slowly, her arms wrapped tightly around a small, battered notebook the color of dry blood. The red leather cover was worn at the corners. Its elastic band stretched and crooked like it had seen things it shouldn't have. The entire cabin watched her like she was carrying a confession. Because in a way, she was. Jenna handed the notebook to Ellis without a word. He didn't open it right away. He simply looked at it in his hands, a small thing, fragile in weight, massive in consequence. Captain Mallory Grant's voice sliced through the moment. "That's private crew material," she said sharply. "You're not authorized to handle internal journals." Ellis finally looked up, his voice steady. "Is it private because it's policy, or because it's prejudice?" Mallory stepped forward. "Give that back." "No," he said. 2 letters, 1 boundary, uncrossable. Malik Jordan leaned forward in his seat, his eyes fixed on the notebook like it contained proof of every slight he'd ever endured. Eloise Tran pressed a new button on her mic live transcription. The older man in 2C, Frank Delgado, folded his hands slowly, silently. Something in him knew what was coming. He'd seen it before. Different uniforms, same story. Ellis turned the first page. His brow furrowed. The entries were dated, but handwritten quick notes, coded phrases. He read aloud, May 3rd, passenger 3A, urban attire, double-check ID. He flipped again, May 18th, passenger 1D, unusual name, watch attitude. Another page, June 1st, row 2, not dressed for first class, confirm social media. Murmurs rolled through the cabin like a shudder. Eloise whispered. She cataloged people like luggage. Mallory took a step forward. Those notes aren't policy. They're just field thoughts. Ellis looked at her with controlled disbelief. "You wrote these," he said. "You used your position to profile travelers before they even sat down." Mallory didn't deny it. She just said, "I've been in this job 20 years. I've developed instincts." Ellis nodded. "Instincts aren't the problem," he replied. "It's what you do with them that defines the damage." From the back, Jenna's voice came, trembling but clear. She told me to flag passengers that didn't match the environment. Her exact words. Mallory spun on her. "Jenna, don't do this," but Jenna didn't back down. "Last week, you told me to delete 2 names from the iPad. You said it was for standardization. One of those names was Nia Ellison, a ripple." Everyone turned to row 4A, where a young black woman with a quiet, nervous smile froze mid-sip of her ginger tea. Nia's voice cracked. Jenna nodded. She said, "Your documentation looks suspicious. You're a design student, right?" "Yes," Nia whispered. Ellis stepped in again. "Nia, may I ask how did you book this flight?" Nia's hand shook as she pulled out a portfolio from her bag. "I won a scholarship program through Horizon Lux's diversity outreach. It came with a voucher for private travel to my showcase in New York." Ellis turned back to Mallory. "You tried to erase her, too." Tyler Vex threw up his hands. "This is madness. So now every deviation is racism. Maybe she just made a mistake." Frank Delgado stood up, the quiet older man from 2C. His voice was tired, but resolute. "No, Mr. Vex," he said. "Mistakes don't have patterns. Bias does." Jenna walked down the aisle now, her eyes brimming but locked forward. "I didn't know who I was becoming," she said aloud. "At first, I just followed the captain's lead. I thought I was learning, but I was, absorbing something I didn't question." She paused beside Nia. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You were never unworthy." Ellis nodded, then turned back to the cabin. "This logbook," he said, holding it up, "isn't just bad judgment. It's a ledger of exclusion. It reflects something Horizon Lux was never meant to be." Mallory's jaw clenched. You think you can walk in here and dismantle my career with one book? Ellis's voice was almost soft now. I didn't dismantle it. You did. Celine Knight's voice chimed again from his phone. Ellis, compliance has received photo documentation of the notebook. We've begun a formal review. Legal is preparing next steps. Thank you, Celine, he said quietly. Then, to Mallory, you may return to the cockpit and sit quietly while we determine the next step. But you're no longer in control of this flight. Mallory laughed, a dry, exhausted sound. You think the passengers will just go along with this coup? She turned to them. Well, do you want to keep flying with a man who hijacked protocol just because his name wasn't on a screen? No one spoke. Then Eloise did. I want to fly with a man who doesn't need to humiliate anyone to feel important. Malik added, I want to fly with someone who doesn't delete names to feel safe. Frank, I want to fly with someone who listens, not just commands. And finally, Nia. I want to fly with someone who saw me when I didn't think anyone would. Ellis closed the notebook gently. The red band snapped across the cover like punctuation. Then he looked at Mallory and said, without anger, only finality. You were trusted with flight, but you chose fear over fairness, control over care, and that ends here. The silence that followed Ellis Raynor's words wasn't peaceful. It was thick, tense, like the cabin was holding its breath. Captain Mallory Grant stared at him, then at the passengers, then at the notebook. Her shoulders stayed square, but her stance was slipping. We've had policies for years, she said. Discretionary guidelines. It's how luxury aviation stays secure. Ellis's tone didn't rise. He didn't need volume, he had evidence. You didn't create security, you created a gate, he said, and you kept moving it. Mallory's mouth opened, but before she could answer, Kenley Moss stepped forward from near the cockpit. The first officer had been quiet too long. Captain, he said, voice low. They deserve the truth. Mallory turned to him, stiff with warning. Kenley, but he didn't back down this time. I'm sorry, he said, turning toward Ellis in the cabin. I made an edit request to the manifest this morning. I didn't know who it was for. Captain Grant said it was a flagged security concern. I didn't ask more questions. Ellis blinked once. Then, you deleted me. Kenley nodded. I did. A hush fell again. Malik Jordan whispered. He said it out loud. Finally, Frank Delgado leaned forward in his seat. You didn't think to ask why you were editing a name off the manifest. Kenley's voice cracked. We're trained to trust the captain. No, Frank said. You're trained to trust the truth. Mallory crossed her arms, jaw clenched. I was protecting the experience of everyone on board. Ellis raised an eyebrow. From what a man in a linen coat and a boarding pass, Eloise chimed in, eyes fixed on Mallory. You saw a black man and assumed threat. That's not security. That's profiling. Mallory shot back. I've flown thousands of hours. I've earned the right to make judgment calls. Ellis's reply came like stone. And I built the company that gave you that cockpit. Jenna spoke up again. Captain Grant bribed me last week, she said, trembling. $2,000. She told me to adjust a guest profile and remove a flagged name. Gasps rippled. Ellis turned gently to her. Do you have proof? Jenna nodded. I didn't delete the message. I saved it. I knew I might need it someday. Ellis looked her in the eye. That day is now. She pulled out her phone and forwarded the message to Celine Knight. Celine's voice came through a moment later. Message received. Logged, timestamped, bribery confirmed, Mallory exploded. You're all turning on me after everything I've done for this airline. Ellis answered softly. You didn't protect the airline. You tried to control who it served. Kenley looked pale now. I didn't know it would spiral like this, he said. Frank spoke firmly. You didn't have to know. You just had to care. Nia Ellison had her head bowed not in shame, but in quiet anger. They didn't even see me, she whispered. They saw my name and assumed I didn't belong, that I was a mistake. Ellis stepped toward her aisle. You were the reason this outreach program existed, he said. You were the proof it worked, and they tried to erase that. Tyler Vex, who had been unusually quiet, now stood with a smirk. Oh, please, he scoffed. This is turning into a therapy circle. He waved his black elite partner card in the air. I've got status. I've flown this line for 5 years. You're gonna believe some emotional interns over me. Eloise turned her camera directly toward him. Let's start with that card, she said. You know Horizon Lux updated partner cards last year, right? They're metal now. Yours is plastic. Tyler blinked. Show us the back, Eloise added. He hesitated. Frank stood. You forged it, didn't you? Tyler sneered. You think I need to fake status? Yes, Nia said quietly. You needed it more than we did. Ellis tapped his phone. Celine, add Tyler Vex to the compliance log. Possible credential forgery. Logged. Celine confirmed. Mallory was unraveling now. Her voice rose, shrill. This is a witch hunt. You're all just angry because someone finally said no to you. No, Ellis said. We're angry because for years, no one said anything at all. Then, for the first time since boarding, he looked at Kenley Moss directly. Why didn't you stop her? Kenley's voice barely held, because I was afraid of losing my job, my record, my reputation. Ellis's tone was low, cutting, and so you risked mine instead. The weight of that truth filled the aisle. Ellis turned again to Mallory. Your captain's license was built on trust. You violated that trust. You're suspended from this flight and subject to internal review, effective immediately. Mallory opened her mouth, but there was nothing left to say. She stepped backward, shoulders hunched, face gray. Ellis turned to Kenley. You'll remain in the cockpit for now, but your participation is under investigation. Kenley nodded, eyes lowered. I understand. Eloise stood now, camera off, hand at her side. I thought this was going to be just another trip, she said, but it turned into something more. Frank added, it turned into a reckoning. Nia nodded, it turned into truth. Ellis didn't smile. Not yet. But something in his posture and his breath finally relaxed. For the first time since the flight began, the air in the cabin felt like it belonged to everyone. The red notebook sat closed on the counter now. A relic, a record, a reckoning. Its contents had been exposed, but its consequences were still unfolding. Ellis Raynor stood near the aisle, calm but changed. He wasn't a CEO in that moment. He was a man who had been tested, not by money, but by meaning. Nia Ellison remained seated, her sketch pad now resting against her knees. Her fingers twitched not from fear, but restraint. I thought the scholarship meant something, she said quietly. It does, Ellis replied, But a system that honors you with one hand and deletes you with the other, that's not respect, that's optics. Across from her, Jenna Rowe nodded slowly, lips tight. I kept thinking if I didn't say anything, it would blow over, but every time I stayed silent, it got louder in me. She looked up at Ellis. I don't want to be that kind of quiet anymore. In the galley, Captain Mallory Grant sat slumped on the fold-down seat, staring forward at nothing. Her hands still gripped the sides of her hat, knuckles white. She didn't speak. She didn't argue, because for the first time there was nothing left to defend. Near the front, Tyler Vex still stood, but this time leaning against the wall like the gravity in the cabin had increased tenfold. He wasn't used to being invisible, especially not in first class. He muttered, "This is ridiculous. You're all overreacting." But his words had no audience now. Even the attention he'd once demanded seemed to recoil from him. Then came a new voice. Soft, male, worn at the edges. Seat 7D, near the rear. "I'd like to say something," the man said. He stood slowly, one hand resting against the seat in front of him. He was in his 70s white, with silver hair and a faded pilot pin on his blazer. "My name is Russell Denton," he said. "I flew private for 32 years before retiring, and I trained Mallory Grant." The cabin stilled again. Everyone turned. Even Mallory looked up, surprised. "I vouched for her when she was young," Denton said she had the instincts, the control, the presence. But now, hearing all this, he swallowed, took a breath. "I realize I helped build a version of aviation that kept some people outside the cockpit. Not because they weren't skilled, but because they didn't match our comfort zone." Ellis listened intently. "I thought I was just passing on tradition," Denton continued. "But what I passed on was control, without accountability." He looked straight at Mallory, "And I'm sorry, because I think you believed that was strength." Mallory didn't respond, but her grip loosened. Ellis approached Denton slowly. "You didn't make her decisions," Ellis said, "but owning the part you played that matters." Denton nodded, his eyes glistening. "This is the aviation I hoped would exist," he whispered. "I just didn't know it would take this long." Celine Knight's voice returned through Ellis's phone. "Ellis, FAA internal response has acknowledged the captain's logbook and confirmed it as admissible in misconduct investigations. You're clear to proceed with protocol override." "Thank you," Ellis said. He turned toward the cabin again. "This company was never meant to be exclusive by design," he said, "but over time, cracks turned into systems, systems turned into shields, and shields into weapons." He stepped forward. "I created Horizon Lux not to elevate class, but to elevate character. Somewhere along the way, that mission got lost." He gestured toward the red notebook. "But now we've found it again." Malik Jordan stood, his hands unclenched now. "My mom used to say, the most dangerous seat on a plane isn't 1A or 28B. It's the one someone tells you you're not allowed to have." He looked around the cabin. "Today, we all saw what that looks like, and what it feels like to take it back." Eloise Tran nodded quietly. "We documented it. We witnessed it. And now we can't unsee it." Tyler Vex took one last breath of defiance. "You think any of this changes how people think he snapped? You embarrassed your crew. You made your own flight a circus." Ellis didn't flinch. Truth always feels like chaos to the people benefiting from silence. Kenley Moss finally spoke again, his voice resigned. I made a choice to look away, and it cost me my integrity." Ellis met his gaze, then started again with honesty. Kenley nodded. "I flagged your name thinking it wouldn't matter, but it mattered, because you mattered." Ellis looked at Jenna. Malik, Nia, Frank, Denton, Eloise, every face that had stood when it counted. "I came on this flight undercover to evaluate quality control," he said. "What I found was something deeper, that power without empathy is a hollow seat." The intercom crackled. This time. Ellis reached for it. His voice came through every speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Ellis Raynor, founder and CEO of Horizon Lux. I'd like to thank you not for your patience, but for your presence. What happened today won't be buried. It will be the blueprint." He paused. "This aircraft will fly again, but it will never fly the same." The hum of the jet's auxiliary engines filled the silence. Not a single passenger spoke as Ellis Raynor returned the intercom receiver to its cradle. His words still hovered in the air like vapor, hanging just long enough to settle deep. No one clapped, no one cheered. They just breathed differently now, with awareness, with gravity, and with a quiet readiness to decide who they were in this moment. In row 4A, Nia Ellison slowly slid her sketch pad into her tote bag. She wasn't drawn anymore. She was listening with new ears not just to Ellis, but to the truth she'd doubted in herself for years, that she belonged, that she was never the mistake. Across the aisle, Malik Jordan leaned forward and whispered, "You good?" Nia exhaled. "I will be." Near the galley, Captain Mallory Grant still hadn't moved. Her posture had slumped, but her eyes were scanning like a cornered figure calculating exits, still hoping for a shift in the tide. But the tide had turned. She just hadn't accepted it yet. Jenna Rowe walked the aisle now, tablet cradled in her arms like a confession. She stopped near seat 2C. Frank Delgado looked up. "I found something else," Jenna said. "Internal complaints. Not just about this flight, about others. I was told to clear them from the tablet and tag them as resolved, even if no investigation occurred." Frank raised an eyebrow, told by whom Jenna hesitated. Then Captain Grant. "A month ago." Frank looked to Ellis. "That's a pattern, not an incident." Ellis nodded, then looked at Jenna. "Did you keep any of the data?" She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a small silver flash drive. It looked like nothing, but in her hand it was evidence. "I archived them," she said. "I didn't know who would believe me, but I couldn't delete them." Celine Knight's voice rang in from the phone. "Ellis, please hold. Uploading file now. We're receiving over 23 complaints tagged under Jenna's ID, manually reassigned or closed without resolution." A pause. None of them made it to compliance. Mallory stood abruptly. "You're not a judge," she said. "This isn't a courtroom." "No," Ellis said, calm as ever. "But justice doesn't always wait for a gavel. Sometimes it shows up in an aisle with the people watching." Tyler Vex finally spoke again. "You're all just upset because someone enforced the rules." Malik shot up from his seat. "Whose rules?" he asked. "The ones where you get to fake your credentials and no one checks. But I get flagged because I wore sneakers instead of loafers." Tyler laughed. "You want a gold star for being loud now?" "No," Malik said. "We want an airline that sees people, not profiles." Eloise Tran stepped into the center aisle, holding her camera in one hand, but it wasn't recording now. This moment didn't need footage, it needed action. "This isn't just about race," she said. "It's about a system that rewards silence and punishes integrity." Jenna spoke up. So did Kenley. "And now it's our turn." She turned to Ellis. "What happens next?" Ellis didn't answer immediately. He looked at each of them, Eloise, Malik, Nia, Frank, Jenna. He looked at the retired pilot, Russell Denton, and then his voice dropped low, steady, full of something ancient and human. "What happens next," he said, "depends on whether we believe this cabin deserves better than just leather seats and champagne, whether we want safety or fairness." Kenley Moss, still standing near the cockpit, looked up with glassy eyes. "I want to be better," he said, "but I don't know if that's enough." "It's a start," Ellis replied, "but it's not a pass." The door to the rear galley opened again, and a new figure stepped forward, a woman in a Horizon Lux badge, clipboard in hand, Selena Groves, an in-flight supervisor sent to monitor luxury routes under audit. She looked at Ellis, then at Mallory. "I was asked to board discreetly before takeoff to observe crew behavior," she said. "I stayed out of the way, took notes. Now I'm ready to submit them." Mallory's face paled. "You were watching this entire time?" she asked, incredulous. Selena nodded. "The CEO was supposed to ride quietly. I was the silent report. Now, it's not silent anymore." Ellis gave a slow nod. "Submit everything to Selene." Selena nodded and disappeared to the galley with the flash drive. Then came the shift. Not of roles, of resolve. Passengers stood, not all at once, but enough. Frank, Eloise, Malik, Nia, Russell, Jenna. They didn't yell, they simply stood, like witnesses taking oaths, like people saying, "We see you, we stand with you, and we won't sit back down." Mallory took one last defiant breath. "You've made your point." "No," Ellis said. "You made it. We just wrote it down." He turned back toward the cabin. "Today, we rewrite not just this flight but the flight path forward." The jet's cabin was no longer divided by rows and roles, not by suits or seats, not by silent nods or smirks. It was something new now. A shared space, a waiting pulse, like the moment right before takeoff, when the engines hum just a little louder and the air shifts around your chest. Ellis Raynor took a slow breath. Standing near the center aisle, he was no longer a mystery, and yet some weren't ready for who he truly was, especially Captain Mallory Grant. "I don't care what title you claim," she said, stepping forward with shoulders squared. "You've disrupted protocol, destabilized crew dynamics, and put my authority at risk." Ellis didn't blink. "Your authority was never the problem," he said. "It's how you used it without consequence. That ends today." She scoffed. "You still think one speech makes you noble? That's theater, not leadership." He stepped closer. "Then let's be clear." His voice dropped, measured, clean, final. "My name is Ellis Raynor, founder and CEO of a Horizon Lux Aviation Group. I am the full equity holder of this aircraft, this route, and this cabin, and I did not come here to give a speech." A pause. "I came to reclaim what prejudice tried to erase." Gasps scattered across the cabin like sparks on dry wood. Tyler Vex froze mid-step. Jenna Rowe dropped her tablet against her chest like a shield. Kenley Moss stepped back from the cockpit threshold. Even Frank Delgado, composed and quiet, let out a soft, audible, "Well, damn." Nia Ellison covered her mouth. She'd suspected, hoped, even, but hearing it was different than guessing. Her eyes welled, not with fear, but with something simpler. Relief, validation. You own it, she whispered. All of this? Ellis nodded once, and everything it was meant to stand for. Celine Knight's voice echoed through the phone. Ellis, legal has confirmed full executive control has been restored to your profile. FAA response has been logged. You are clear to act. Ellis lifted the phone closer. Thank you. Celine, stand by. Captain Grant's face was stone now. You tricked this crew. You came here to bait us. No, Ellis said. I came here to believe in the company I built, but you showed me it's not the one I imagined. He turned to Jenna. You confessed early. That matters. Then to Kenley. You followed a directive you didn't question. That matters too in a different way. And finally, to Tyler Vex. You forged status, verbally harassed passengers, and mocked multiple guests on board. As of now, you are permanently banned from all Horizon Lux flights. Tyler's face went red. You don't have that kind of power. Celine's voice sliced in before Ellis could even respond. His access has been revoked, effective immediately. Tyler started down the aisle, but the passengers flanking him didn't make way. They didn't move, they just watched. Watched the man who had once filled the plane with noise, now surrounded by silence. He grumbled, grabbed his carry-on, and shuffled toward the front door. Frank muttered, "Good riddance." Eloise Tran stood near the rear, arms crossed. That's accountability. That's how it starts. Ellis turned to her. It's only a start if we keep going. He faced the rest of the cabin now. This aircraft represents more than miles flown or drinks served. It represents values the ones we claim in press releases and videos. But if they don't show up here, in the aisle, in the faces, in the choices, then they don't exist. From the galley, Selena Groves, the onboard auditor, stepped out again. I've completed my notes, she said, and I'll be submitting all recordings and testimonies to internal governance. But I'd also like to say something. Ellis nodded. Selena looked at the passengers. I've watched thousands of flights, she said, but I've never seen a cabin lead itself like this. When leadership failed, you, the people, corrected it. That's rare. That's powerful. Then she turned to Ellis. And that's legacy. He nodded, but inside something cracked. Not loudly, not visibly, just a quiet tension behind his ribs. A memory, maybe, of all the flights he'd taken where he was overlooked, of all the boardrooms where he was doubted until he signed the check, of every time he'd wondered if all the power in the world could ever erase what some people refused to see. And still he stood, because you can't make people see you, but you can refuse to disappear. Nia rose from her seat. She walked down the aisle, not rushed, not unsure. And when she reached Ellis, she looked up at him. I didn't know who you were, she said. He smiled gently. That's how I wanted it. But I think, she continued, you just gave all of us permission to be seen without needing to prove anything first. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a slim black envelope. This, he said, handing it to her, is a standing charter voucher. Anywhere in the world. You earned more than a flight today. You earned a future. Nia stared at it, stunned. I don't know what to say. Say it forward, Ellis said. Someday you'll be the one with the seat, choosing who else gets a chance. The passengers behind them remained still, moved, hushed, awake. Russell Denton stood again, voice low but unwavering. This isn't just about a seat, this was a mirror, and it didn't lie. Ellis nodded slowly. No, he said, It never does. The jet cabin felt like it had gone through turbulence, not in the air, but in the soul. Not a seat had moved, but everything was different. Everyone was listening now, not because they had to, but because they chose to. Ellis Raynor stood still near the aisle. His coat sleeve rested against his wrist like armor made of quiet restraint, and in that silence, he made the decision, not as a CEO, as a man who'd spent too many flights being mistaken for less. Mallory Grant, Ellis began, turning to the captain seated silently near the galley. Her eyes flicked up. You were given a cockpit, and with it, control over more than just an aircraft. You held dignity, access, safety in your hands. He paused. Let the weight settle. You abused that authority. You edited records. You manipulated crew. You profiled passengers under the mask of policy. Mallory straightened her spine, but said nothing. Ellis didn't raise his voice. That cockpit is no longer yours. Effective immediately. You are dismissed from this flight and relieved of all Horizon Lux responsibilities. Permanently. A collective exhale rolled through the cabin. Some had expected it, but, hearing it, that was justice delivered with clarity, not cruelty. Next, Ellis turned to Kenley Moss. The first officer looked down. I know what I did, Kenley said quietly, and what I didn't do. Ellis nodded. You followed an unlawful directive. You altered official records without question. And when confronted, you hesitated. Kenley nodded, accepting it. You are hereby suspended pending full review. Your access is revoked until further notice. Then, Ellis added, but your honesty will be taken into account. Kenley exhaled, ashamed but grateful. Ellis now faced Jenna Rowe. Her fingers shook at her sides. I didn't try to hide, she said, not after I saw what was happening. You didn't, Ellis said. You confessed. You saved records. You protected the truth when it could have been easier to protect your position. He looked at her not coldly, but honestly. You're dismissed from this flight, but I'm recommending you for reassignment, pending ethical training, if you're willing. Tears filled Jenna's eyes. She nodded hard. Yes, she whispered. I am. Finally. Ellis turned to the front where Selena Groves, the in-flight auditor, stood still, clipboard in hand. You witnessed it all, he said. Selena nodded, and submitted everything even before I gave you the order. That's what accountability looks like, she replied. And what it sounds like, Ellis added. Ellis took a step back and turned toward the passengers. Every row had eyes on him now, but it wasn't about admiration, it was about alignment, because what they had just seen was someone leading not with dominance, but with discernment. He addressed the cabin. Horizon Lux wasn't built to impress boardrooms. It was built to reimagine what travel could be. He gestured to the cockpit. What happened today betrayed that vision. But what you all did by standing, by speaking, by refusing silence, you brought it back. He paused. And now, we move forward. From the speakerphone in his hand, Celine Knight came through again. All dismissals have been recorded and confirmed. FAA compliance team has acknowledged your executive authority. You may proceed with operational override. Ellis nodded, and we will. He stepped forward, voice steady, effective immediately. I am launching the Horizon Sky Trust, a $20 million initiative to fund underrepresented voices in aviation pilots, crew, engineers, leadership, no marketing, no optics, just opportunity. The announcement hit the cabin like sunrise, a soft brightness in the soul. Frank Delgado stood, slow and sure. He spoke not as a lawyer, not as a passenger, but as a witness. "That's real leadership," he said. "You didn't raise your voice. You raised the standard." Malik Jordan stepped beside him. "You rewrote the system." "Mid-flight," Eloise added, "and you did it without shaming, just showing." Ellis looked around the cabin at the seats, the quiet now filled with presence. Then he said, "Today is the last day Horizon Lux flies without transparency." He reached into his coat pocket again. "This isn't symbolic, it's structural." He pulled out a folded paper, his executive reform charter. "This document," he said, "will be posted in every Horizon Lux terminal, crew room, and aircraft cockpit. It states the new protocols for empathy training, anonymous passenger grievance reviews, and live behavioral audits by third-party monitors." Someone clapped, then another, then row by row. The cabin filled not with applause, but affirmation. This wasn't for drama. It was for direction. Ellis returned the paper to his coat pocket, and in that pause a soft voice came from behind. "Nia Ellison, Mr. Raynor." He turned gently. "I know you gave me a voucher earlier," she said, "but you gave me something bigger." He waited. "You gave me back the seat I doubted I deserved." Ellis didn't speak right away. He just nodded, like he'd been carrying that message in his chest for years, waiting for someone else to finally say it aloud. For the first time in hours, the cabin was still. Not still with silence, but with clarity, the kind that settles not just in the air, but in the bones, like the moment after a storm, when even the light feels cleaner. Ellis Raynor sat in seat 2A now, coat folded neatly over his lap. He wasn't hiding anymore. He wasn't proving anything. He was simply being across from him. Malik Jordan sat with headphones off, sketching lyrics in a worn notebook, a new song, maybe, or maybe a way of remembering this flight without needing photos. At the rear, Eloise Tran closed her camera. No more footage. Some stories didn't need edits. They needed echoes. She scrolled through her gallery frames of quiet resistance, strength, faces that weren't magazine perfect but were perfect in their defiance. And she whispered, "This is the story I'll share." Nia Ellison stood near the galley, staring out the window. The sky beyond the wing looked different now, not just blue, but open, like it no longer held her back. Beside her, Jenna Rowe stood quietly, no longer holding a tablet. "Thank you for not erasing me," Nia said softly. Jenna replied, "Thank you for standing so I could find my own spine." Russell Denton, the retired pilot, stepped toward Ellis's row. His hands were clasped, expression calm, not proud, not ashamed, just awake. "I flew my last plane 12 years ago," Denton said, "but this flight grounded me in a way no emergency landing ever did." Ellis looked at him. "It grounded all of us," he said, "and that's how we learned to take off again." The flight attendant, a replacement from standby named Lena Corbin, brought warm towels and orange slices down the aisle. She didn't say much, but every gesture was gentle, deliberate, like she was cleaning more than hands, maybe memories too. Lena paused by Ellis. "Sir," she said quietly. "Thank you." He looked up. She added, "For showing that you don't have to scream to be heard." Frank Delgado tapped the side of his briefcase with a pen. "Ellis," he called from row 2C, "you plan to announce this to shareholders." Ellis smiled. "They'll read it in the quarterly letter. You're going to downplay it." "No," Ellis said. "I'm going to let the reforms speak louder than any headline." Frank leaned back. "I wish I had run into more CEOs like you in court." Ellis gave a quiet chuckle. I wish more courtrooms had passengers instead of just witnesses. Selene Knight's voice returned one final time through his phone. All public and internal reports have been submitted. FAA liaison requests a final statement. Ellis paused, then pressed the mic. Tell them this. We encountered turbulence, but the kind you can't measure in altitude. He looked toward the passengers. We navigated it, together, in the cockpit. Kenley Moss had turned off the autopilot. He sat alone now, not because he had to, but because he needed to. For the first time, he wasn't watching dials or graphs. He was watching himself, questioning, grieving, and maybe beginning again. As the plane began its descent, Ellis stood. He moved down the aisle slowly, stopping to speak with each passenger. He didn't smile for show. He listened to Eloise, to Malik, to Naya, to Denton, even to Jenna. He wasn't above them. He was among them, at the rear. Selena Groves handed him a sealed envelope. Final audit summary. She said, "You can open it when we land." He tucked it in his inner pocket. Thank you for watching when others looked away. Selena gave a slight nod. Next time, she said, maybe we won't need audits to catch the truth. The aircraft's intercom chimed. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenley Moss's voice came on. We're beginning our final descent into New York. Please secure all belongings and return to your seats. And thank you for your patience, for your truth. The line cut out, but the message stayed. As the city lights began to flicker below them, Ellis looked out his window, not at the skyline but beyond it, because some flights aren't about destinations, they're about course corrections. And this one, it had just rewritten the coordinates for what accountability and dignity really looked like at 40,000 feet. The wheels touched down with a soft shudder, not a jolt, not a crash, just a landing one that felt like both an ending and a beginning. The engines whispered into reverse thrust. The cabin lights blinked brighter, and yet no one reached for their bags. They were waiting, not for instructions, but for closure. Ellis Raynor stood calmly by the front galley, jacket buttoned, shoes planted firmly on the cabin floor. For hours, he had navigated far more than altitude. He had weathered assumption, challenged legacy, and reclaimed dignity, not just for himself, but for every person who'd ever been told, in ways loud or quiet, this seat is not for you. Kenley Moss emerged from the cockpit, head lowered, expression unreadable. He didn't seek redemption. He sought understanding. Ellis met him at the door. First flights are rarely smooth, Ellis said, but the question is, did you learn to fly better? Kenley nodded, his voice soft. Yes, and this time, I saw everything. Ellis reached out and shook his hand, not out of forgiveness, but out of belief in the possibility of better men. The cabin doors opened. The jet bridge connected with a metallic click, but still no one rushed to disembark. Passengers remained in their rows, not out of confusion, but respect. Nia Ellison stood first, sketchpad in hand. She turned to Ellis. I think I'm going to design something from this. He tilted his head. A seat that sees everyone, she said. Not just the elite, not just the expected, but all of us. Ellis smiled gently. That's how the future begins. Malik Jordan followed behind her. He offered a handshake, one firm, sure, and without pretense. I changed the song title. He said, it's called Altitude of Truth. You wrote the ending, Ellis asked. Malik shook his head. No, I lived it. Eloise Tran passed next. Camera off, hands free, but eyes filled with stories. "I won't sell this," she said. "I'll teach it. To whoever's listening." Jenna Rowe, quiet behind them, walked slowly, not because she was hesitant, but because she didn't want to miss what she had almost buried. When she reached Ellis, she stopped. "I still have a lot to learn," she said. He looked at her kindly. "So do I." Outside the aircraft door, Selena Groves handed over the final audit report, now signed and sealed. "You changed the protocol," she said. Ellis accepted the folder. "No," he replied. "We revealed what the protocol had become." Frank Delgado lingered near the exit. "I practiced law for 30 years, he said. "Thought I'd seen it all." And Ellis asked. Frank smiled. "Turns out, truth flies higher than power." Russell Denton exited last. He paused, looked around the cabin, placed a hand on the door frame. "You gave aviation its soul back today," he said. Ellis nodded. It never left. It was just waiting in the aisle, finally alone. Ellis looked across the now empty cabin. 12 rows, 22 seats, but 1,000 stories. He walked to seat 1A, the very seat he was denied just hours earlier. He sat down, not out of spite, but closure. He looked out the window, not at the tarmac, but through it, toward a new kind of sky. His phone buzzed. A message from Selene Board is asking for a full public statement. Press is requesting comments. Everyone wants to know what you'll say. Ellis typed slowly. "Tell them I boarded as a passenger. I left as a mirror. And the next time they fly, they'd better be ready to look into it." He hit send, then stood, gathered his coat, and walked out of the cabin not as a CEO reclaiming power, but as a man who gave it away in the name of something greater. Not every battle ends with shouting. Sometimes the quietest man in the room carries the biggest legacy. Ellis Raynor didn't fight back with rage. He didn't escalate with ego. He simply stood with grace, with truth, and with power rooted in lived experience. From the cockpit to the cabin, this flight became a mirror, one that reflected not just prejudice, but possibility. Today, a CEO reminded us that the most valuable seat isn't the one labeled first class. It's the one that recognizes your humanity. And as the passengers exited that aircraft, they didn't just disembark a flight. They walked into a future shaped by accountability, empathy, and courage. But the question now is, what seat will you choose? Discrimination doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers in policy, protocol, or a flight attendant's cold glance. But justice rises with every voice, every story, every time someone says enough. If this story moved you, like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful true stories that challenge systems and uplift dignity. Until the next flight, fly high, stay grounded, and remember, power is not in how loud you speak, but in how deeply you're heard.